Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Modern Farming Podcast, where agriculture meets education, innovation, and outreach. I'm your host today, Chris Weary with the Green Gene Foundation, and with me is Brad Turner.
Hello, everyone.
How you doing today, Brad?
Everything's great. This is going to be another fun one.
Oh boy, it is.
We're not in my arena, but I'm looking forward to it.
Oh boy, and everybody likes chickens. If you don't like the chickens, you like the eggs. But I'm really excited today. We have a shower of modern game bantam chickens and an author of numerous books on showing chickens. His name is Jeff Duguay, and he's here to talk to us about his experiences in the chicken world. Jeff, welcome, and tell us a little about yourself.
Well, thanks, Chris and Brad. It's good to be here. Well, a little bit about myself. I grew up in Maine, rural town, Turner, Maine, and I lived. I was there until 28 years old. Went to college there, then went to grad school at Eastern Kentucky University, then West Virginia University. Moved around a few times for jobs as a professor of wildlife management in Mississippi at Delta State University, and I currently work for the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. I'm the director over our game species management branch. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. 60 years condensed into 10 seconds.
Very good. Very good. Did your so you've had some academic training, extensively, it sounds like, in wildlife type biology, ecology, that sort of thing, and followed with a job. Did that help you, or did that push you into breeding and exhibiting chickens, or is it something else?
Yeah, not really. So I've actually been doing this since I was a kid. So one of my earliest memories when I was a kid was we had chickens growing up. I was probably like 5 years old or something. I remember I'd go to the chicken house, get eggs and stuff, and my mother loves to tell the story. Apparently, we had roosters, and apparently, when you pick the eggs, a lot of times the hens, if they're broody, especially, they'll, pick your hands. So as little kids, I guess we didn't get them. One day she cracked an egg to cook it, and a chick popped out. So, yeah. Yeah. So, but I really had, chickens probably since I was 4 or 5 years old, I guess. So I have degrees in the sciences, and, I taught at the university level. And I would teach, one of the many courses I taught was introductory biology. And in that, I would cover artificial selection, where humans select for certain traits.
Sure.
And the thing that I actually like most about showing is the line breeding part. When you show birds, there's a book called The Standard of Perfection. And that tells everything about them, what they should look like, color, back length, shape, all that kind of stuff. And the idea is to try and breed that perfect bird. So that's what I like the most. I like looking at these chickens and saying, okay, I need to improve my birds in this particular area. So if I pair these two birds, is it going to give me what I want? And I would actually take the birds into my classroom when I was teaching at the university level, because these modern games are supposed to have real long legs. So they're refined birds, small body, long legs. And I banned all the birds so I know when they were all hatched. So I'd bring them in and have the students measure the leg length. And, I'd say this bird's, 4 years old, 3, 2, and so on. So they would do that, and then they would graph it and kind of see over time how, leg length has changed. So that's what I really like about showing, looking at these birds saying, okay, I need to improve on this area. How am I going to do that? And that's sort of, that's stuff I really enjoy. And then, of course, when you show the birds, that's kind of, way of testing, are you really achieving your goal or not? Because over time, your birds should improve. And, you can't improve everything at once, just a little bit at a time. Pick 1 or 2 traits. So as your birds improve over time, ideally, you'll start improving in the showroom. So instead of getting last place all the time, maybe now you get 3rd place, or, and then eventually try to, win a show.
Nice.
But you have a lot of different varieties. I mean,
Yeah, I do. The variety In the case of moderns, it's the color, so it's different colors. So I have several varieties of moderns. I have birchen modern game, which is what I first started with. And those are black, they have white heads. Then I also have some silver blue. And silver blue were created by crossing birchen and blue together. And you get silver blue. So it's really a gray colored bird with a white head. And then out of silver blue, you can also get silver blue, splash, and birchen. So I raised, my birchens, my silver blues, and out of silver blues, I got splash. So that's how I ended up with the splash variety. And then I also got some BB reds, which is a black-breasted red. And they're a pretty bird. They have this bright orangish red on their wing bows, on their neck feathers, on the saddle, which is on the back. And I didn't have any golden duckwing, which is kind of like the BB red, but gold instead of red colored. And I read an old book on how to create those. And what it says is take BB red males, cross them over silver duckwing females, and then over 3 generations, talk about crossing them back on how to establish your golden duckwing line. So I figured I'd try it, and it actually worked out well. So now I have golden duckwings. And I got that, I basically created that variety because you never see them in a show. They're not very common. So I have several different varieties of those moderns. And I also have a few red naked neck bantams as well. So I wanted to get into something just a little different, so I raised a few of those. And I chose them. One reason they're in a different class. So when there's 7 classes of bantams, there's modern game, there's game, which include American game, Old English, feather legs, and so on. And the naked neck are in the single cone clean leg. So they don't directly compete against the moderns unless you get on champion row with both. Then you're competing against, each other. And plus my wife likes naked necks because they're kind of ugly looking. They don't have feathers on the neck. So I figured I'd get something she likes as well.
Yeah, I saw the pictures. No,
yeah, they're a weird looking chicken.
Very.
Well, moderns are kind of weird too.
Yeah, I'm not a chicken guy, but I can see where that would be. I mean, you're just always improving. You're always changing. Yeah. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's what I like. The challenge, trying to improve the birds. Create the perfect bird, which you never will, but hey, get as close as you can, or at least the most perfect in the show.
Yeah, awesome. Right. I'm sure you've done that a few times.
I won a few. It's never enough, but hey, I'm happy to have won at least one.
Well, hey, and it keeps you going, right?
Exactly.
Otherwise, you get bored with it. You got to have that push. That's awesome. Yeah. Why bantams? What drove you to do bantams? Did you just like the way they looked, or?
Well, with the moderns, just because the way they look, they actually come in bantam and standard, which is the large fowl. But I like how they look. And actually, there are some large fowl breeds I like as well. But the reason I have bantams, I like the moderns, but also they take up much less room. So if I had large fowl, I'd have to have much fewer birds just because I don't have the space, for a lot of birds. Yeah.
No, I had no idea. I mean, I've always been a livestock guy, but large animals. But when I was at a fair as a kid showing a steer or whatever, my favorite thing to do was to go look at all the different breeds of chickens. Over all the rest of the livestock, it was the chickens, and it's amazing the variety that there is.
Yeah, it's crazy how many different, breeds, varieties of show chickens there are. And I still love doing that. When I go to shows, the thing I like the least is having to sit there and try and sell my chicken books. So I rarely do that. I might stick them out and put a little sign, text me at this phone number. What I'm doing is I'm walking around looking at chickens, taking pictures, and hopefully get, a lot of times it's pictures for future books. But I'd much rather look at chickens than try and sit around and sell a book.
Yeah. No, when I was on your website, I was looking at, you had a studio set up. And
the
lights and the whole, and the pictures were at this close-ups they're gorgeous. That's the chickens.
Yeah, what I did was I actually started bringing my setup to some chicken shows. And that one you're thinking of is it was in Texas. I live in Louisiana. So my wife and I, we drove to the Yellow Rose Classic show. It was just outside of Dallas. And it was their first show. And we set up, my little studio that I have, with the background has different colors and the lights and everything. And I took pictures of birds. And I did that because it's a great way to get some good quality pictures for the books. And I told people, hey, if you let me take pictures of your birds, I'll give you free digital copies of your bird, and your bird may end up in some of my books. So it's great. People love it. So they get pictures of their birds for free, and it's good for me. So I get pictures for the books. Some of them I know, I'll never use in a book, but I still do it because, figure if people are kind enough to let me take pictures, even if I'm not going to use a picture in a book, I'll take it.
Sure.
Occasionally I get some real ratty looking birds. What's that?
You might make their chicken famous. You might make the
Yeah,
cover.
you never know. Yeah. Yes, I'll put, in the book, I'll say, such and such bird owned by this individual. So yeah,
Big
so I like it. It's fun.
Of all of the breeds you've worked with or written about, what one would be a good one if someone was going to start breeding or raising chickens to show? What would you recommend for?
What I would recommend is, a lot of times people, if they're getting into it, they'll want to know, well, what wins? And they want to get that breed of chicken. Mm-hmm. But, that changes over time based on the breeders, how much they're working on them. What I always tell them is get a breed of chicken you like. Because you could get a breed that wins a lot, but if you don't like that kind of chicken, it's not any fun. So I always suggest go to shows, look at the different chickens, talk to breeders, talk to people showing, find out about the birds. Some birds, they're just aggressive. Old English game, they're very popular, but man, those little suckers are aggressive as can be. So they're not the greatest one for kids. Modern games, they're really tame bird. But you actually have to train a modern game bantam to pose for the judge. Okay, so that takes a little bit of work, but it's kind of neat because the way they pose is they'll stand up real tall because they got tall, skinny legs. They got a long neck, and they're supposed to really show that off. So they'll stand really tall, and then you use what's called a judging stick. It looks like an antenna basically. And you teach them to raise their neck up so it's directly over their feet. So you got them standing basically at attention. And, the way you do that is you use dog treats, that like Old Roy soft dog food. They love that stuff. Yeah. First, like right now I'm teaching them, I got little chicks. So I'm teaching them, hey, this is good food. So I'll throw it to them, they'll eat it. And then I get them to eat it out of my hand. And then I'll put them in cages like they have at the shows. And I'll get them to take it out of my hand. And then I'll raise my hand up, teach them when my hand goes up, you stretch for it, and then you get a treat. Then you slowly introduce the judging stick. So if somebody doesn't want to go through that kind of work to be able to show a chicken, then that wouldn't be a good breed for them. So you need to find a breed of chicken you like. That's probably the most important thing. It's just as much work to, work on a chicken you hate versus one you really like. So, yeah.
Any differences as far as diseases or some more maintenance?
Yeah, some are definitely more maintenance. The birds have a lot of feathers, like silkies, cochins, brahmas, the crested breeds, like Polish. People like them because those Polish, they're cool looking chickens, but man, you got to deal with mites. Those things get mites in their crests all the time. Those heavily feathered birds like the cochins and silkies, mites are a problem. Seems like you're constantly fighting those. Modern game, they have really tight feathers and not fluffy feathered birds, so they don't get external parasites a whole heck of a lot. So yes, as far as disease goes, not so much disease, more just those mites and lice and things. Yeah. And mites are kind of gross, they don't get on, they're bird specific, but you get them on you, it's kind of nasty looking.
Pick at them, yeah.
So which chicken is the one that has the real furry feet? Because that's what everybody
goes
to at
the Cochins have that, and also silkies do, and brahmas. But yeah, a lot of people have silkies. They're a really calm bird. They're pretty. They got the feathers on their feet. That's real popular both in shows, but also just the backyard. Yeah, the common birds.
Yeah, we had some brahmas with really feathered feet.
Yeah, that's a book I plan on writing in the future. Is the Brahma? I kind of have a list sort of in my mind on what I'll write and things, and that's one that I'll be getting to. I'm going to put that with Langshans because they're both feather leg breeds, so I figure I'll put them together in the same book. And one of the reasons I do that is not a lot of people show Langshans So if I wrote just a Langshan book, I could never sell enough to recoup the cost of printing it.
Sure.
For some of these lesser shown breeds, like with the crested breed book, I have 4 different breeds of chickens in there. Let's see, we have the Krevkor, Houdan, Polish, and Sultan. Of those 4, Polish are pretty popular.
Right.
The other 3, if I didn't really group them into that book, I really couldn't even write a book on them.
Right.
So I figure this is a good way to get some of the lesser breeds, out there in these books, show people this is what you do to show them things.
Smart theory. I want to get into your books, but I want to ask you first, since we're talking chickens and shows.
Yeah.
Let us in on what we call the Red Stick Poultry Club.
Yeah.
In Baton Rouge. Tell us about that. You help out down there?
Yeah, Red Stick, that means, or Baton Rouge rather, means red stick in French. So that's why we named it that. But that club is actually a real small club. It's Shannon Lejeune, a good friend of mine. He shows Cornish. Probably familiar with the Cornish game hens. Well, he shows those. He's got excellent birds. So he and I got together and decided we wanted to have a show in Baton Rouge because there's really not many shows in Louisiana. There's Louisiana All Game Show that Shane Morris and Peyton Igo put on in North Louisiana. We're Baton Rouge, South Louisiana. So we got together, decided we wanted to have a show. So the club consists of Shannon, me, and my wife. She's the treasurer. She's not so much into chickens, but we needed a treasurer. So she was drafted. And she's a school teacher. She's really well organized, so she really helps us a lot with the organization of the show. So this is actually only a 3-member club. We don't have any dues or anything.
Right.
So what we do with the shows is, we just tell people, hey, we're setting up for the show. We can use some volunteers. So it's run a lot. The 3 of us and then volunteers help out a lot. And we got a local FFA group that comes every year. They help us out, 4-H and just people that show, they'll come help us set up and things. And it's actually a pretty big show. I think we've had it going on for 7 years now. And we usually have about 1,000 birds in that show. And what we do is it's a real kid-friendly show. So when you show at these shows, you can have what you call a double show. So that's 2 shows in one day. So you have 2 different sets of judges. So we'll have 4 judges that judge the open show. So that's where anybody can show. So we'll have 1 set of judges basically start at one side, the other starts at the other side. And you have different colored cards, like 3x5 cards. So we might tell 1 set of judges, okay, you judge the blue card show. So they'll only judge birds with that blue tag. And then we'll have a green tag on the other side. So when they're finished, we flipped it over and the other judges judge the green tag. So what you're doing is you're getting 2 shows in the same day, but you don't have all those travel expenses. So the kids show in those 2 shows, but then we also have a junior show. So with them, they might have, for example, a yellow card. So we'll have a separate judge that just judges the junior show, and he'll go through and just judge those. But the kids, we don't charge them for the junior show. So everybody pays for those 2 open shows, and the kids get to show for free in that junior show. And then, of course, we have trophies and things for the kids. And if you win in the open show, you can win some big money. Talking $50 cash. Might cover part of your gas. But
Yeah, that's a lot, though.
No, that's a lot of money.
Well, that's the open show. That's for the adults.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you don't do it for money. You just, it's a hobby. Bragging rights is really what you win.
Bragging rights. Absolutely.
I imagine y'all have created a lot of monsters doing that. You get much into it as you are. I'm sure you've persuaded some.
Yeah, that show's fun. Also, what they always do too is at our show, that FFA group, they cook jambalaya for us right at the show. We're at LSU. It's a big coliseum. It used to be basketball coliseum where Pistol Pete Maravich played.
Really?
So now they use it as an ag, coliseum. It's got a dirt floor, so it's huge. It can seat like 3,500 people. So it's a huge area. So they cook in there, and you get that jambalaya cooking, and it smells great. And it's a fun time.
Such an interesting place that you live in that area. Nowhere else in the country, right? It's just that spot.
And that show is always the first Saturday in December too. So it's avoid the real hot weather.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Hopefully we get 70s. You never know.
Good temperature for eating jambalaya.
Absolutely. Yeah, sometimes it's pretty cold in the mornings. Never know.
So one last question about these competitions. You know,
Yeah.
you're not a judge, you don't judge, but you certainly know about what champion birds look like.
Yeah.
You give the listeners just one, you know, what's the quality that you're looking for in a bird if you're doing a show?
Yeah, you know, what they call type is the most important thing. That's the overall shape of the bird. Does it conform to what it's supposed to be? But if you look at all the birds on champion row, one thing they all have in common, they're in good condition. You know, so the feathers are really nice. You know, they don't have ratty, broken looking feathers. The birds aren't dirty. Spurs aren't too long. You know, the beaks are trimmed, toenails are trimmed. So if you're going to win in a show, in addition to having, you know, a bird that's got the right type, it needs to be in good condition. So you can't just pull a bird out of the yard, stick it in a cage and think it's going to win. You know, it's not. You know, so that's one thing all, you know, those that win a lot, they have in common. They always take real good care of their birds. They condition them. A lot of times, like, you know, on the Facebook chicken sites or whatever, you know, you might see somebody post, you know, that hasn't been shown for very long. I've got a show coming up in 3 weeks. What do I do to condition my bird? You know, the best answer is tell them start next spring when you hatch it. That's what you can do. Because conditioning really starts at hatch. You know, you can't take a bird, stick it in a cage with bad feathers and think it's going to get good feathers all of a sudden. You know, the feathers aren't going to change until they molt and grow in new feathers. So you got to, you know, when your birds hatch out, you know, if they're overcrowded, they're not going to grow well. You know, as they're growing in feathers, they'll be picking each other's feathers. You know, so conditioning starts at hatch. It's the whole process, giving them quality food, fresh water, letting them get out, you know, get in the rain is actually real good for their feathers. You know, I wouldn't say throw them out in a thunderstorm, but if they have access to going outside, you know, that's really good. You know, so that's the thing. Keep them in good condition starting at day one.
You know, when I was researching you a little bit and you talked about picking a chicken, you went into a pen and you talked about sensing it or just feeling it.
Right. Yeah. With the modern game, they have their game species, you know, so that came from the game fowl that would fight, you know, in these, the modern game were actually developed when cockfighting became illegal in England. So these cockfighters, a lot of them got together and said, well, let's develop a breed specifically for chicken shows. And they developed the modern game and they used some of these game fowl bloodlines to develop it. So it's got to have this real hard, solid body, you know, like a fighting chicken would. So with the modern game, the best thing you can do in terms of figuring out, is this a quality bird, is to pick it up. Because if you're holding a modern game and it's real skinny in the breast, you can feel its keel, it's not a good bird. They should have a big, solid breast. They should have a short back that's wide, so it's wide at the shoulders and gets narrow, basically like a heart shape. You know, so that's the way that I really evaluate these birds a lot. Even these younger birds, I get some that's pulled, you know, picking them up yesterday. And looking at them, they kind of all look the same. But then, you know, I picked them up and they're only, you know, 2.5, 3 months old. And I picked one bird up and I'm like, oh yeah, this is probably gonna be a really good bird because she was just solid chicken. Another one I picked up kind of thin. I'm like, well, we'll see, you know, see how this one grows. So with that breed, and a lot of breeds too, it's, you know, handling them to really feel what they're like. And that shows that's what judges do. They'll handle every chicken. So in the cage, it may look good, pick it up, might actually be real scrawny and the feathers are covering stuff or whatever.
So the judge picks them up, holds them and feels them and touches them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they'll look at everything. You'll see them, they'll pull out the wings, you know, how good are these wing feathers, the condition, is the color right? You know, they have to be certain colors, you know, things like that. So I do a lot of that stuff, educational things, and I'll post it on my Facebook page, you know. I have video on how to vaccinate for fowl pox, you know, how to administer medication orally. Just, you know, kind of a chicken fanatic like a lot of people that show. So that's what I do in my spare time for fun. Take pictures of chickens, videos of chickens, write about chickens, you know, things like that.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, keeps me out of trouble, you know.
At the shows, then I hadn't even thought about this till you talked about handling. Are they shown? They're not shown in the cage. Is the judge? They are cages. They're not walking around an arena like cows.
Correct. What they do is they have cages set up. So like in our show, for example, we'll have 1,000 birds. So we got, those cages. If it's a bantam cage, there are 4 holes, so 4 individual spots for each cage. Large fowl, it's 2. So we'll have all those cages set up, and you set them up, by breed. So for example, if we're looking at silkies, so all the silkies are together, and then it's by variety. So you'll have all the white silkies together, all the black silkies, all the splash, and so on. So the judges go through and they'll, start with a particular breed in a class. Like silkies, they're in the feather leg class. So if you're a judge, you'll go and say you're starting with the silkies. You might look at the white silkies. So you'll look at all the white silkies, and they're even grouped by sex and age. So the cockbirds, they're a year-old male. So they'll go through and they'll look at all the year-old white silkies, pick the best one. And then they'll do the same thing with the hens, a year-old female. They'll pick the best of that. And then the cockerels, which is a male less than a year, they'll pick the best of that. And same with the pullets, female less than a year. So now you've got 4 white silkies that have all been picked best for their age. And then out of that, they'll go through and they'll pick the best variety. So of those 4 best chickens, well, actually, I take that back. They'll also pick number 2. So they'll look at number 1 and 2 for the males, 1 and 2 for the females. And then they'll pick the best out of all those to be best of variety. And then they'll pick the second best chicken, which is reserve of variety. So the number 1 white chicken and the number 2, white silky in this case. So you could have 2 pullets, that are 1 and 2. So, just because a hen gets number 1 doesn't mean she's guaranteed anything else. So they'll do that for each variety. So they'll pick the 2 best white silkies, splash silkies, black silkies, and so on. And then they'll take the best of breed. So out of all the number 1 silkies, who is the best? And then out of all the rest of those, who's the second best? So now you get the best of breed for the silkies. And then they'll do that same thing for all the birds in that same class. So in other words, all the other feather-leg chickens. So they'll do that for the Brahmas, Langshans, and so on. And then they'll pick the best feather leg. And then they'll pick the second best, which is reserve feather leg. And then those champions from each of the classes go up on champion row. So now you've got the best feather leg bird up there, the best single comb clean leg bird, the best modern game, best bantam duck, all that. And they'll look at all those and they'll pick the champion of the show and then the reserve champion of the show. So that's how they do it. And they're all in the cages, but judges take every bird out, they handle them, look at them, put them back, and then they have cards on them called coop cards. And they'll make notes on them for themselves, and then they'll write, 1, 2, 3, best of variety, best of breed. So it's and actually, and with the judges too, they actually have to go through a training process. They have to. There's an apprentice program that they're in. I think it's 3 years. There's the American Bantam Association, American Poultry Association, and they license the judges. So they go through this apprentice program for, I believe, 3 years, and they have to do what's called clerking for the judge. So when the judge is judging, they go along with the judge, and they'll write down the place for all these birds, and the judges show them things, and the judge is training them is what they're doing. And then after that, when they're ready, they'll take a written test, and then they have to take a showroom test, where they'll go through and they'll judge birds and place them, and then with a licensed judge that says, yeah, you passed or no, you didn't. So it's a pretty lengthy process. So those, the judges are pretty good. They're well trained. And judges are, always willing to help you out at a show. After the show's over, you can say, hey, how could I improve in this bird? They'll almost always are willing to take time with the exhibitors. Yeah.
That's nice. Got to have that feedback. That
absolutely.
Nice community, right? A good, helpful community. Everybody helping each other.
Absolutely. That's how your birds will improve. If you don't know what's wrong with it, then how can you improve on them?
Feedback's important everywhere, even chickens.
Yeah, and that's the idea behind those books too that I write. They're breed specific. And what I'll do is, they have that book, The Standard of Perfection, that tells everything about them. It's what the judges judge by, and I'll break down every little trait. For example, comb. So I'll describe this is what the comb should be like. Should have 5 points. The middle point's the highest of the 5. It should be this color, all that sort of stuff. And then I'll show pictures saying, this is a good comb, and here are examples of combs that aren't very good, and this is why they're not very good. So I'll do that for every one of those traits. That really helps, especially with somebody new to showing chickens. They can look at it and say, oh yeah, now I know what this means. So I remember like it shows, I would lose, obviously, and I would look at other people's birds to see, well, how are theirs better? And I remember one thing with the modern game, it says that the wing fronts, very front part of the wing, should stick out. And I didn't really know what that meant, but then I was looking at some birds that won and looking at mine, and I'm like, oh yeah, like with mine, the front of the wing was covered by the breast feathers, but these other guys that were winning, they weren't. You could clearly see that wing. So that's what it meant by, the wing front should stick out. So that's the stuff I had put in the book to help people like me that didn't really know a lot about it.
And so that trait would be bred into them? I mean,
exactly. Yeah. So like I have pictures of my birds, and I have it in the books too, saying these are some of my earlier birds, and these are birds I have now. And through line breeding, if you look at my early birds, you would never think the birds I have now came out of them. They were some sad looking birds early on, So it's the challenge of line breeding. And the thing is, don't give up after a couple of years. It takes a while. It's small incremental changes that will result in these big changes so that, your birds are improving. Yeah.
Do you talk about that in your books too? Not what you're looking for, but this is kind of how to do it.
Yeah, what I'll do, with these books is I partner with, breed experts. A lot of times it's judges that are well known for, judging these breeds, and as well as breeding them. So like right now I'm writing the Italian breeds book, for example. That's the breed called the Ancona, the Buttercup, and the Leghorn. And Steve Beatty and Brian Carricker, they're both judges, and they both have been raising Leghorns for a long time. So they know a lot about Leghorns. So I'm writing it with them. And then I'll also contact other people, could be judges or individuals well known for good breeds or, quality birds in that breed. And I'll ask them if they'll contribute to the book. Like Jim Salee, for example, he's also a poultry judge, and he's been raising Leghorns for a long time. He wrote a section for me on breeding Leghorns. And, some of these, they give really good specific detail. With the Old English game bantams, for example. When I worked on that book with Peyton Igo, he's a judge. He's been showing them for a long time. I contacted a bunch of these breeders, and I talked to them at shows, and everybody said, oh, those Old English guys, they won't help you at all. They're too secretive. They were the most helpful people ever. I was impressed. They gave me some really good specific information on how to breed Old English game in order to get quality showbirds. For example, some of them gave information. If the bird's holding its wings too low, this is what I did to raise birds so that the wings would be higher, or maybe the tail angle was wrong. Same thing with the cochins. There's an exhibitor, Matt McCammon. He's got really good cochin birds. And the wings on cochins, commonly they're just held too low. So he gave a lot of really detailed information on his breeding strategies to improve his wing carriage. His birds have got good wing carriage. So I get a lot of people that contribute like that to these books, because they know more about it than I do. I know a lot about moderns, but not the others. And interesting story. So I wrote the modern game book first, because that's the breed I raised. So I knew more about them than anything else. I was talking to my friend Peyton Igo, the judge. He shows Old English, and I was saying, I'm kind of sad. I wrote this book, but I don't know enough about any other chicken to write any more books. He said, I really like Old English. I know enough, but I don't write. I don't like to write. So I said, well, let's partner on this book. So that's how that kind of started in terms of partnering with these judges. So we wrote that book, and, then from there, the next one was on silkies. And Marty McGuire, he's a judge. Same thing. He's been showing them for a long time. Tony Davis, Marty's been judging and showing them for a long time. And Tony, he's an exhibitor, and he's, got tons of wins with silkies. So I contacted both of them and said, hey, would you guys be interested in partnering on a book with me? So that's how that came about. And then same thing with that book, though. We still reached out to other people to contribute. So that's kind of how, I do this stuff. I'll think about, or even ask, who is a good judge of this breed? For example, the Belgian, it's spelled Duckcle. Okay, I spell it because you ask 10 people, they'll pronounce it differently. What I call the hardcore people, they call it Belgian Duguay. Others call it Diuckle. Others call it Duckle. Well, Susan Buchanan, okay, she shows those birds, breeds them. She got real good birds. And she kept pestering me to write a book on them. So I finally gave in. I said, all right, I'll write a book, but I don't know who the Duguay people are. I said, I need to know a judge that's really good with this breed. So she recommended Aaron Hamilton, So I contacted him and I said, hey, Susan recommended you. These are what I do for these books. I'm wondering, would you be interested in writing a book with me on these? So he's been breeding these birds for 50 years. He's an expert. And he actually used to be a chemistry teacher. So he said, yeah, after we had talked and stuff. And I bring up he's a chemistry teacher because it's kind of interesting. I would write up stuff. I'd look at the standard, have pictures, write it up, send it to him and say, hey, what do you think about this? And the teacher, him, would come out. Instead of saying, this isn't very good, he would say, well, that's good, but I think we can do better. And then he would tell me, this is what you need to improve it. So he was great to work with. He's very detailed. It was funny. To this day, I still have not met Aaron. We communicate a lot, by a messenger or whatever. But, some of these people that I've written books with, I've never met them, but they've been great. So it's a funny story. Yeah, we can do better. And we did. We got a real good book out of it.
Huh. Sounds like everybody's willing to help.
For the most part, they really are. It's
cool.
It's good. It's a good community. Once in a while, you get somebody that just says no, but that's the rarity. Like with my first book, the book on modern games. So this is how I got started writing these books to begin with. Okay. So I've been showing moderns for quite a while. In my first moderns, they were in pretty sad shape. So I'd go to shows, and I was, in all honesty, my wife and I, we'd go, and I was thinking back in my mind, I hope my birds don't get disqualified. They were pretty bad birds. So my goal originally was not to be disqualified from a show, and I made that goal. Right. Then over time it was, maybe I can get, in the top 3 or 4, hens out of 10 hens, So over time, through breeding, it was, 15 plus years of just breeding that one line. So I've been showing these birds for over 20 years now. So over time, the birds improved, started winning regularly at shows, learned a lot. So what I did was I told my wife, I said, look, I need to take some notes on how I improve these birds so I don't forget. That way later on, if I need to make these changes, I can look at it and see. So I started writing this stuff down and having pictures, comparing them. And then I told my wife, I said, I think this would make a good book. So from there, I kind of took it on and made it into a book, covering all that stuff. And I give a lot of specifics, on breeding. So I say, I put this bird and this bird together, and this is why. This is what I was trying to improve on. This is how this bird was strong in this area. This is how this bird might have been weak in other areas. And then same with the other one. So I did that for the male and female. And then I would show their young, saying, these birds, this is what I got. And it's amazing on some of these birds, you look at them, for example, moderns are a tall, sleek bird. What I tried was something different that a lot of people don't use. So modern's supposed to be a tall, sleek bird. So I took the shortest modern male that I had, but he had a really good body other than that. He had a short back. He was really solid. And I put him to the tallest female I had. And I got some really tall males out of him. So what I started doing from that, what I learned was, you don't have to have 2 tall birds to get a tall bird. So I started breeding first for birds that had the short, wide back. Because most people, when they breed moderns, they breed first to get tall birds. When you get tall birds, they're bigger, so the back tends to get longer. And I did kind of the opposite. I bred for a short, wide back and didn't worry about how tall they were. And then after that, I started working on length of leg. And that worked out really well. So I got these taller birds with the short, wide back. So started out as notes to myself, and then I turned it, into a book from there. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed writing it. And that one, that's sold to, over 14 people over 14 countries. So they show these birds worldwide. And moderns are really popular in Australia. So other than the United States, I've sent more books to Australia than any other country. which is pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like as much an art as a science.
It is. Yeah, it really is.
It's kind of a blending, right? That's really neat.
Yeah. Yeah. You look at these different traits. Well, how will they go? What will I get? Some stuff I tried didn't work, and put that in my book too. If you do this and this, you're probably going to get this kind of junky bird. Don't do that. Save some people some time.
Yeah. You took the knocks for them.
Exactly. This is what I learned,
Hey, Jeff, tell us about, so you're working on a book with the Howard Davenport about health in poultry. What in there? What was that? What was your, what drove you to do that?
Yeah, that one we just published recently. It's called Parasite Diseases and Disorders of Poultry. And I guess there's a few things. There's a ton of chicken Facebook sites out there. So I look at them. That's kind of how I advertise my books. I'll post them on there. And I was just shocked at the number of people that would post stuff about, common situations with chickens. And they knew nothing about it. Like bumblefoot, that's a staph infection in the foot. And just in the general chicken community, that seems to be pretty common. And even other things that, if you show chickens, you think nothing of it. But people new to chickens, and there's a lot of people, as you probably know, that have chickens that never did. They got them for egg laying. So there'd be people that would post pictures of a chicken and say, I don't know what's wrong with my chicken. It just got this tumor in its throat. It's never had it before. And that's the crop, which is outcropping of the esophagus where they store food. And, I'd see stuff like my chicken has this pimple thing on its back by the tail. That's the preen gland where they get oil from. So it's just a lot of general stuff that people didn't seem to know. And if you look at, like the books on chicken diseases, there's some pretty good ones out there. But like with my, books that I write, I have lots of pictures showing, describing. There really wasn't a book out there like that. So I wanted to write a book on these diseases, these parasites, and just general chicken information for those that are new, on these birds. So I knew that Howard Davenport, had done a lot of stuff with chickens in terms of chicken health. So I contacted him, and he was, great help on this book. So we decided to partner on it. So I wrote this book, and I put, stuff like how to check for parasites, even internal parasites, how to look for them under the microscope, all those sorts of things. And then I have lots of diseases, pretty much any common thing you find in chickens or even poultry, ducks, geese, turkeys, any common thing you find in them, and even some stuff that's not so common. I put all that in there with lots of pictures describing it, and then, treatments. I bought books on, veterinary care for poultry specifically. And I enjoyed writing that a lot because, I got a science background, so I really know how to do literature searches, read through the literature, take it apart, glean information and apply it, and use, basically, everyday language. So that's what I did. So I learned a ton writing this book, and I really enjoyed the research part of it a lot. I bought some books on veterinary medicine for poultry. I read a lot of peer-reviewed journals, and I have all those citations in there. So lots of information, stuff on avian influenza, which, we hear a lot about that now.
Yeah.
That's pretty common, especially, with the egg layers, we hear about that. So I cover what is this disease? How is it spread? What are symptoms of these birds? And I show pictures, this is what it could look like, all that sort of stuff.
So for someone like myself that may not be raising show chickens, but
right.
have chickens, that's a good book for just about anybody.
Yeah, it's perfect for somebody that doesn't know much about chickens, or if you do, it's not written technical. It's just general everyday language on this is what it is, this is what this means, this is how you treat it. I got information on withdrawal times, for example, for medicines. So if you're given something to deworm your chickens, this is how you do it. This is how long it takes to get it out of the system so you can eat the eggs. I have a section in there on how to administer medication orally. So I show some real good pictures on the bird, opening up its mouth, so showing the esophagus, the trachea. So you want to make sure you get it in the esophagus, not the trachea, so you don't suffocate your bird. So I cover all that
thing
stuff
I
too.
saw when I looked you up, and I would have failed the test. I would have put it in the wrong hole.
Yeah.
I would have drowned the bird.
Yeah, if you just pour it in its mouth, man, it's probably going to go down that windpipe and that bird's going to die. And I actually learned that the hard way. So I did that once, and so I learned the hard way on that. Yeah.
No, that sounds like a book just for the humanity of the livestock. I mean,
Yes.
it's like almost a have to, even if you just got 2 chickens scratching in your backyard, you need to know
Exactly.
what to look
you need
for.
to know that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, if they got something going on, you need to know what it is and how to treat it. Yeah. And there's, a lot of people, talk about, organic, all natural methods for deworming chickens, like pumpkin seeds. And, so I read the literature on that, and pumpkin seeds don't really deworm them. There's a compound in the pumpkin seeds that, some individuals have taken out in studies and really concentrated it, and that, will help limit the worms. But, chickens never eat enough pumpkin seeds to get rid of that.
Right.
So, I cover some of that too.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
So Clucker books, is that different from your other guides?
Well, the name of my website or whatever is cluckerbooks.com. And then, so that's what that Clucker Books is.
Okay.
And I have all those books on that website there.
So your website is called Clucker Books, and that's where you can purchase your books and you do your marketing.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was a different book, and I didn't want to.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of like, I had to come up with a name, so I figured Clucker Books, chickens cluck.
I like it.
Yeah, the website's addictive. I got hooked on it for about 30 minutes. I just kept going.
Did you? Well, good deal.
I'm not a chicken guy, but it was very interesting.
Yeah, I put a lot of pictures of chickens, or
Yeah.
a lot of pictures from the books on there, so people know what they're like.
Yeah.
I like just watching my chickens.
Oh, I do too.
It's therapeutic. I just go in the coop sometime and just watch them run around and scratch and kick and fuss. I love it.
Yeah, I do the same thing. Have a bad day at work, I just go in there and hang out with the chickens. They don't talk back to me.
Chickens and tractors are very therapeutic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Brad, you have any other questions? I think we're getting kind of to the end of our interview time.
No, it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I learned a lot.
Good deal.
I did too. I love the world of chickens. So
yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. Now's your chance to let the world know what your final thought is, what you want to leave them with.
Well,
chickens or otherwise.
My thought is, what I tell my wife all the time is, you can never have too many chickens. That may not be true, but that's what I tell her. But I just do it because I enjoy it. It's fun. If you get into showing, don't show to win. You'll be disappointed. Right. There's only one winner in that show. Show to improve your birds over time and just kind of enjoy them, enjoy the process, see how they improve over time. That's what I enjoy the most anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
Good deal. Well, I enjoyed it, guys. Appreciate you reaching out.
Very good.
Great having you.
Good deal. Well, if you're ever in the Baton Rouge area, look me up.
I will do that 100%. We'll try to do it in December.
Absolutely. That'd be great.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. I hope everybody enjoyed watching this podcast as much as we did. Very interesting stuff. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye.
All right. We'll see you later.